How is it possible for a person to find life worth preserving, even in the most extreme, horrifying circumstances you can imagine? I mean, what is it, deep down inside of us, that lets some people endure the unimaginable, while others just lose the will to live? We're going to dive into that profound question today, journeying right into the heart of one of the darkest chapters in human history, to find a really startling and hopeful answer about what meaning truly is.
You know, this psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, he would often ask his patients this very stark, very provocative question. It was designed to cut through absolutely everything else and get right to the core of the issue. What is that one thing, that one single thread that keeps you tied to life? Is it your love for a child? A talent you haven't used yet? A memory that's just too precious to let go? The answer to that question? Well, that's where the search for meaning begins. To really understand this search, we have to start where Frankl did, entering a concentration camp. The very first psychological reaction a new prisoner had was just pure, unadulterated shock. Just try to imagine being herded off a train, and you're confronted with the name Auschwitz, a name that already stood for everything horrible. In a single instant, your entire world, your past, your future is just violently ripped away. The mind, it tries to protect itself at first with this strange delusion of reprieve, this desperate hope that maybe it won't be so bad. But that hope, it gets extinguished quickly and brutally.
So the first step in this new reality was a systematic, total dehumanization. It started with losing all your possessions, then all your documents, then every single hair on your body was shaved off. You were stripped of literally everything that connected you to your old life. And then finally, your name was taken away, replaced by a number, often tattooed right onto your skin. You weren't a doctor or a musician or a father anymore. You were a number, an object, just a thing to be managed until it was your turn to be exterminated.
This was the moment it all came crashing down. For Frankl, it happened when he tried to save the manuscript of his life's work. He asked a longtime prisoner for help, explaining how important it was. The prisoner's response was just a single, vulgar word, screamed at him. And in that one moment, Frankl got it. The past was gone. It was never coming back. He had to mentally just cut himself off from his entire former life just to survive the present moment. It was a psychological break, a brutal but absolutely necessary amputation.
And what followed that psychological break was, well, a really strange mental state. When you have absolutely nothing left to lose, except what Frankl called your so ridiculously naked life, the mind comes up with some bizarre coping mechanisms. One was a kind of cold, detached curiosity. Like, okay, what's gonna happen next when they force us to stand naked in the snow? Will we catch a cold? It was a way of looking at the horror objectively, almost like a scientist observing an experiment. Another tool was a grim sense of humor, making jokes about your own suffering. It was a weapon, really, to create this tiny little space of freedom between yourself and this unbearable reality.
So after that initial shock starts to fade, the prisoner moves into the second phase, becoming entrenched in the camp routine. In this period, it's characterized by a kind of emotional death, a slow descent into apathy. The mind, just to protect itself from the constant overwhelming pain and suffering and horror, it just starts to shut down.
Now, this apathy wasn't weakness. It was a necessary shield. The feelings of disgust and horror and pity, they just became too much to handle. After a few weeks, a prisoner could watch a fellow inmate being brutally beaten or see a corpse being dragged through the mud and just feel nothing. The emotional nerve endings were just deadened. It was the mind's way of building a protective shell to make survival in such an abnormal world even possible.
So, with all the higher emotions blunted, life just regressed to its most primitive level. The entire mental world began to center on one thing and one thing only: survival. And that meant an all-consuming focus on food. Prisoners would dream of bread and cake and warm baths. They'd spend what little free time they had debating the best way to eat their tiny daily ration of bread, or describing their favorite meals in mouth-watering detail. It was this soul-destroying obsession, a sign of just how far human existence had been degraded. And here's the crucial thing to understand. This state of emotional death, this regression to primitive instincts, it wasn't a sign of some moral or psychological failure. It was, in fact, a completely normal response to an insane situation. As Frankl, a psychiatrist, observed, this was the expected reaction of a sane mind when it's thrust into a world that has no sanity. It really represents the lowest point of the prisoner's psychological journey, the deepest part of the abyss, right before a profound and life-altering discovery.
And this
This brings us to the turning point. Because in the depths of all that suffering and apathy, a powerful truth could be discovered. It was the realization that while the SS guards could control a prisoner's body and their external environment completely, there was one thing, one sacred space that they could never, ever touch. This quote, "This reveals the core insight of the entire experience. Think about it. Everything could be taken away. Your home, your family, your name, your health, your very life. But the one thing that could never be taken was the freedom to decide how you would respond to it all. You could choose to face your suffering with dignity. You could choose to comfort another person, to give away your last piece of bread. This inner decision, this choice of attitude, that was the last and ultimate human freedom."
This discovery, it unlocked a whole new reality. It meant a prisoner could actually retreat from the filth and the brutality of their surroundings into a world of inner richness and spiritual freedom. They weren't just a passive victim of their circumstances anymore. They had agency. They could decide what kind of person they were going to be, mentally and spiritually, even as their body was wasting away. They could choose to be worthy of their sufferings.
So how did they do it? What were the actual tools they used to build this inner fortress? Well, Frankl identified several anchors. The first was love, the intense contemplation of a wife or a child. Another was appreciating beauty, even in the camp, like a glowing sunset seen through the trees, or a piece of music. Humor, as we talked about, was another vital tool. But maybe the most important of all was having a future goal. Frankl himself survived by imagining himself in the future, standing on a lecture platform, explaining the very psychology of the concentration camp to his students.
This realization came to Frankl during a death march in the freezing cold darkness. He started thinking of his wife, imagining her face, hearing her voice, and then a thought just transfixed him. He didn't even know if she was still alive, but suddenly it didn't matter. He understood that love goes so far beyond the physical person. It finds its deepest meaning in the spiritual being, in the inner self. And this inner connection was a source of bliss and strength that no external force could ever destroy.
And all of this brings us to the universal lesson that grew from these experiences. Frankl took the insights that were forged in the fires of Auschwitz, and he developed a new school of psychotherapy. He called it logotherapy, from the Greek word logos, which means meaning.
So at its core, logotherapy proposes that the deepest, most fundamental motivation in all of us is a will to meaning. It's not a will to power or even a will to pleasure, like other schools of thought proposed. No, what we truly crave, what keeps us going, is the belief that our life has a purpose, a meaning that we are here to fulfill. And when that sense of meaning gets frustrated, it can lead to some really deep psychological distress.
Logotherapy's approach to suffering is particularly profound. It doesn't try to get rid of it, because suffering, just like fate and death, is an inescapable part of life. The crucial point is that if life has meaning, then suffering must also have a potential meaning. The way we face our unavoidable hardships, the way we take up our own cross, that gives us a profound opportunity to add a deeper meaning to our existence.
So how do we find this meaning? Well, Frankl outlines three main paths. First, through what we give to the world, by creating a work or doing a good deed. Second, by what we take from the world, by experiencing something like the beauty of nature or encountering someone in a loving relationship. And third, and this is the most important one for those in extreme situations, we find meaning by the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering. This third path ensures that meaning is possible under any and all conditions. And this right here illustrates a fundamental shift in perspective. We're so used to asking what we want from life, right? What do we hope it's going to give us? Logotherapy completely flips that question. It suggests that life is constantly asking us questions. Every single situation is a challenge, and our actions, our decisions, those are our answers. We aren't here to demand things from life. We are here to respond to what life demands of us. Our meaning lies in that responsibility. This quote, which Frankl loved, it just perfectly summarizes the entire philosophy. The prisoners who survived were often not the strongest physically, but they were the ones who had the strongest why. A person to see again, a work to finish, a reason to endure. If your purpose is strong enough, you can bear almost any hardship, anyhow. Your why becomes your ultimate source of resilience. Ultimately, this entire journey, from the absolute depths of Auschwitz to the heights of the human spirit, it leads us right back to that one fundamental question. Frankl's story isn't just some historical account, it's a mirror. It forces us to confront the question for ourselves, right here, right now. And after all that we've seen, there's nothing we need fear anymore, except maybe not having an answer. So the question remains for you. What is your purpose? What gives your life meaning? What is your why?